How to Create the Universe, The God Series Book 32, by Mike Hockney. This free audiobook series has been brought to you by the Foundation of Illuministic Guides. Contact the Foundation Public Liaison, The Phoenix, at tinyurl.com/foundation322. Check our Foundation page at tinyurl.com/foundation323. And we have a posting group with many books and resources at tinyurl.com/foundation324. For the complete books that will be covered in this series, see tinyurl.com/Hockney322. Remember, there are many truths within lies and lies within fact. Truth is relative to the observer. The sign of a seeker is the quest for the truth. In that sign you shall conquer. Find the path in your own quest for the Gnostic grail of illumination. Choose wisely. We will be watching you. In a Hockney. Chapter 5. The Two Levels. It's essential to grasp that there are two levels to reality. 1. That of eternal necessity. And 2. That of contingency. The first level is that of the Euler circles, just going round and round forever, generating perfect sine and cosine waves that serve as the basis frequencies for ontological Fourier mathematics. This is the unchanging, perfect background to everything, the fiber and fabric of existence. It's the transcendent, noumenal domain of knowledge and truth. It's the answer to existence. However, life isn't lived at this level, it's lived at the contingent level. Imagine the eternal Fourier frequencies as the keys of a cosmic piano. Life is conducted at the level of the music played on the piano, not at the level of the piano itself. The piano is the forever. It's an instrument to be used, to be played. Life is the tune played on it. So, how do you play this piano? Every monad has its own autonomous piano on which to play the tune of life. How is the tune played? What's playing it? There is in fact no sufficient reason for a set of Fourier frequencies not to spontaneously generate inverse Fourier transforms and Fourier frequency functions. It's simply a capacity of the system. Nothing can prevent it. All of these Fourier activities produce novel experiences for the monadic mind in which they are occurring. All of this amounts to a kind of dream world in which the monadic mind resides. However, when many monads interact, produce collective inverse Fourier transforms, they thereby produce the experience of otherness, which is what is interpreted as matter, something separate from us and outside us. It really is all in the math. We defy anyone to demonstrate that what we have just described is not the fundamental basis of mental life, and the so-called world of matter. These are all you need to build a universe. You don't need anything other than waves and Fourier mathematics. You certainly don't need God or matter or randomness. Fourier mathematics is the basis of both mind and matter, and their mind-matter interactions. Math. The problem of existence is the problem of math. According to science, some mysterious, indefinable and inexplicable thing called matter is what existence is all about. Science has never once attempted to address the unarguable case advanced by idealists that scientific matter doesn't exist, and, even if it did, we could never know anything about it since it would always be mediated by our minds and thoughts. Hence we could never have any knowledge of what it is like in itself, independent of how our minds represent it. According to Abrahamists, some mysterious, indefinable and inexplicable thing called God is what existence is all about. According to Eastern religion, some mysterious, indefinable and inexplicable thing called the oneness is what existence is all about. Mathematics alone can tell you what things actually are. Mathematics can define and explain. Nothing else can. Whenever science seeks to say anything meaningful, you can be sure it will be using mathematics. Religion never says anything meaningful because it never uses mathematics. Religion is what science would be if you removed mathematics from it. It's the human tragedy that people are willing to use mathematics without having any clue what it is, where it comes from and how can it exist at all. The commonplace idea that math is a man-made language is comically dumb. We know what man-made languages are like: English, German, French, Spanish, Japanese, and so on. None of these has any resemblance whatsoever to math. How can a human being invent how can a human pluck Euler's formula out of nothing? The reason why people are so keen to say that math is man-made is because if they're wrong then the converse is true. Man is math-made. That is, of course, exactly the position of ontological mathematics, and it represents the highest possible wisdom. Anyone who opposes us opposes reason itself. and we simply have no time for the irrational. Don't bother with meditation or prayer. If you want something to contemplate, then contemplate mathematics. To all those who doubt mathematics, we simply ask, why? What possible reason could you have for thinking that anything other than math is the basis of existence? Anything you propose as an alternative to math will be irrational, illogical, inconsistent and incomplete. So, if you want to be supporting a rational, rather than miraculous, answer to existence, you have nowhere to go but math. Science is intelligible only to the extent that it uses math. When it strays from math, it starts saying insane things such as that existence randomly and magically erupts out of non-existence for no reason, via no mechanism, for no purpose. It then tries to suppress all analysis of this ludicrous stance by making yet another ludicrous claim that it's invalid and meaningless to refer to anything before the Big Bang. The scientists who say this ought to try studying philosophy before making absurd philosophical assertions. Time and space are not ontologically and epistemologically defined in any way by science. They are defined instrumentally, which tells you how to measure them but not what they are. So how can you say that you can't refer to anything preceding time if you haven't bothered to explain what time is? Where have you proved that a time precursor doesn't exist, this being the very thing that gives rises to time? Time is in fact created by mathematics. It's simply a mathematical property associated with imaginary numbers. We would like to see any scientist on Earth prove that time doesn't derive from eternal mathematics and imaginary numbers. And, if they can't, they should shut their mouths about whether it's valid to ask what comes before the Big Bang. Time and space. People get hopelessly confused about time and space. This all stems from the disastrous notion of time being the means by which philosophers and scientists introduce motion into the world. You will never understand motion and change if you link these to time. Time, when understood properly, that is mathematically, is simply imaginary space that exists orthogonally to real space. It has nothing to do with motion. It's just a container, exactly like space. Motion, as we have already shown, is simply the result of the principle of sufficient reason, ensuring that all equivalent states are given exact parity of treatment, and processed in precise, uniform, continuous sequence, one after the other, circularly. This is the basic expression of motion. Hence change. It's 100% mathematical. It takes place entirely outside space and time. Photons, which are maximally length contracted, in what we might call their protospatial aspect, and maximally time dilated, in what we can refer to as their prototemporal, imaginary space, aspect, are ipso facto not in space and time. They belong to the frequency domain of eternal Euler circles. When cosines and sines are strictly orthogonal to each other, there is no such thing as space and time. Space and time are what you get as soon as non-orthogonal phase relations apply between sines and cosines. In the diagram of the Euler circle shown below, all orthogonal relations are axial, while non-orthogonal phase relations apply to the interaxial regions. As soon as sines and cosines are paired non-orthogonally, they can no longer be said to exist in the mental, dimensionless domain of pure frequencies. They have now entered the space-time domain, hence have physical rather than mental signatures. To put it another way, they are no longer maximally time dilated and length contracted, hence now have dimensionality. How big is the universe? When wave functions break free of the mental domain, hence enter the material domain, they then have a fundamental problem, namely, how big is this space-time domain they have just entered? There is no such thing as a fixed Newtonian space-time container standing outside the mental singularity, waiting for dimensional wave functions to rush into it. This fact has an extraordinary consequence. Wave functions at the Big Bang have to enter space-time with a certain mathematical signature, which is very close to their prior mental, dimensionless, signature. However, once in space-time, there is no physical barrier to constrain them. There are no boundaries shutting them in. This has an inevitable effect. The high-energy waves will simply expand, and fill more and more space-time. That is, create a larger space-time environment. This is exactly the process underlying the so-called expansion of the universe, which of course is the expansion of both space and time, and not just space, as science would have you believe. The phenomenon of redshifting is vital in this context. Redshift, in physics, redshift happens when light or other electromagnetic radiation from an object is increased in wavelength, or shifted to the red end of the spectrum. In general, whether or not the radiation is within the visible spectrum, Reta means an increase in wavelength, equivalent to a lower frequency and a lower photon energy. Wikipedia. Scientists will tell you that waves redshift because the universe is expanding. In fact, the opposite is the case. It's because waves are redshifting that the universe is expanding. To state it more clearly, space-time is made of dimensional wave functions, and these wave functions are naturally lengthening because there's absolutely nothing to stop them from doing so. No invisible barriers. They can't remain frozen and fixed. There's no sufficient reason why they should. This all means that the dark energy driving the expansion of the universe is actually the energy of space-time wave functions themselves, which had been expanding ever since the Big Bang. Eventually, space-time will be 100% extended, and this will correspond to the end of the material universe, since there will no longer be any energy at all in space-time. All the energy will be in the mental singularity. This is exactly why we have an oscillating universe, Big Bang followed by Big Crunch, followed by Big Bang, and so on. Science gets all of its interpretations wrong, and always for the same reason. It rejects mathematical rationalism and blabbers on about materialism and empiricism.